Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I am Damon Sparkle.
And I'm a boy named Sue. I'm Patrick Guerra. How are you tonight?
Folks, we this week are talking about one of the award winning and buzziest horror films of the year. It took home the award for Best Screenplay at the Cannes Film Festival, which, if you are any kind of film fan, you know that is always a big deal to win at Cannes, one of the biggest film festivals of the year. A little movie called The Substance.
The Substance released in September of 2024, starring Margaret Qualley as Sue, Demi Moore as Elizabeth Sparkle, and Dennis Quaid as Harvey, written and directed by Coralie Fergeau and David Cronenberg, if he were in his grave, would certainly be banging on the door to get out because, whoa, body horror's back in a big old way with The Substance.
It's funny because I started hearing about this film coming out of Cannes, and generally speaking, and I'm not saying like I've never been to Cannes, but I do pay attention to film festival winners because, we've talked
Yeah.
about this on the show before. You and I are award whores. We like the awards. We like to
Oh, love them.
watch the Oscar movies. So I always pay attention. The big winner out this year was Anora, a film that opens in October that I'm super excited about. Sean Baker, really, really good filmmaker, and that was the one that won the Palme d'Or, which is like their best picture for the Cannes Film Festival. One of my favorite films of all time, Pulp Fiction, won that back in 1994. But this one won Best Screenplay. But I heard about it. It was a body horror film that won Best Screenplay, and it received a 13-minute standing ovation after the initial screening. Now, the reason I preface all that by what I talk about the Cannes Film Festival is, typically speaking, the Cannes Film Festival is very much like an early Oscars. It is art house films. It is the films that aren't generally going to earn 120, 30, 140 million dollars. They're the films that you're going to hear about at Cannes, and you're probably going to hear about again around Oscar season. They're those kind of movies. It's typically not Dune Part 2. Not to say they don't show those there, but the ones that get the most attention are the films that you will generally hear about again at award season. But generally speaking, Patrick, you don't hear a lot about horror films at Cannes. So when I heard about The Substance, that it received a 13-minute standing ovation and it won Best Screenplay, immediately my head clicked and I was like, what is this? I've got to see this. And it had a well-known cast, of course, with, as you mentioned, Demi Moore, Margaret Qualley, and Dennis Quaid in a role, sadly, that was originally supposed to go to Ray Liotta. He was cast in it. Sadly, Ray Liotta passed away and they had to recast his part with Dennis Quaid. But major star power, and it won at Cannes. So I was like, that's odd because you generally don't hear about horror films winning at Cannes.
Yeah, it got me real buzzed up because myself and my brother Schwink, we're just like you and I are big cinephiles. It's like we talk more about who wins at Cannes and Venice than we do who wins at the Oscars because it's like we already know, like you basically know about 6 months ahead of time that here's where all the real movies are going to be talked about at the in the award season. And when I saw this come up, and I'm going, man, like people were really into this. I had to go see it, and everybody was buzzing about this. Everybody was like, "This is an insane body horror movie." Now, Damon, body horror is near and dear to my heart. For some reason, body horror just gets me. How you do body horror, you can do it kind of any type of way. We talked about the Candyman. I think revival is what I would call it. The Candyman revival with Nia DaCosta, who did that a couple of years ago. That was kind of a body horror movie. That stuff got under my skin. That idea of like kind of rotting, pustule, just the body decaying. Well, Coralie decided she wanted to go one step further. It's not just about the body decaying, it's about what it means to age, what it means to get old, what it means to age out, which is a real thing in a lot of not just the film business, but like other professions too. From doing sports and doing sports coverage, sometimes they go, "Hey, man, I think you're getting too old to do this," and they move you along. You age out. So a lot of athletes age out very early. But in the film industry, it's very different. There's like weird times in a person's career where they're just not getting calls. It just dries up. And what really piqued my interest with this movie, they were like, Demi Moore is on fire in this movie. Now, Demi Moore used to be one of the biggest names in Hollywood. If you think about Sydney Sweeney now, Demi Moore was like 3 times as big as Sydney Sweeney back in the 90s. In the 80s and the 90s, Demi Moore was humongous. She was very big. Then she probably turned 35. And guess what? The phone stopped ringing at 35. Now most people today go, boy, I wish I was 35 now. Like, you know what I mean? Like we don't even think of 35 as old anymore. Well, back then, you might as well have just been an old granny at that point. They were like, ugh, Demi Moore's 35. Stop calling her. So I thought to myself, wow, she's back, and she never really went away. She'd always done like smaller stuff, but she was back in a way that was, well, I guess commenting on her own career because she came from an era where they went, you're a certain age, we're going to stop calling you. We don't have anything for you until you get older. Well, Demi Moore's older now, and obviously this script came across her desk, and she went, yeah, I'm gonna fuck with this because I got something to talk about. I got something to talk about. And very much the plot of this film is that she is this superstar of the 80s and 90s. Well, they don't put a time frame on it, but it feels like maybe the 80s or 90s she was a very big deal star. And now she is sort of like a workout celebrity on TV. This is, by the way, a very weird, strange world where there's still workout celebrities on TV. That does not exist anymore, but that was a big deal for a while. And this movie portrays it as modern times, where one of the biggest celebrities around can be a workout celebrity, and that's what this character of Elizabeth Sparkle is. And she turns 50. Happy birthday, Elizabeth. We're so happy to have you, but now it's time for you to go. You're done. You're 50. You got to go. And Elizabeth's like, huh? And it just, like, literally the gravy train just stopped. Like someone pulled the handle and the thing came to a screeching halt, and her career was over in a flash just because of two numbers that are her age. And she sort of feels a little down in the dumps about herself, and who wouldn't, when they basically tell you, hey, you're too old to do this. And she gets this little mystery thing called the substance. She takes a look at it, and it tells her, hey, you want a beautiful, perfect version of yourself? Try out this substance. You're a perfect candidate for it. And she tries it out, and Damon, it wouldn't be Rewind to the Living Dead if things didn't go horribly wrong.
Yeah, and it's interesting because this movie is very much on the nose. And what I mean by that is this is not an art house movie where by the end you're trying to figure out what it was attempting to say. Now, I'm not saying those can't be good movies. There's been plenty of those that have been made where you get done with the movie and you're like, oh, I really understood what they were going for. I understood the underlying message of the movie. Not every movie has that, of course, but a lot of movies do. And you're like, I really understood that message. Now, there's the other side, Patrick, when we talk about the really, truly art house films, the ones that make me want to bang my head into the wall, where I leave and I have to go home and read an article so somebody can explain to me what it was. And I'm like, oh, that's what you were trying to go for? Because I totally didn't understand that or totally didn't get it. Again, I'm not saying those can't be good films. I'm just saying that sometimes those films are a little more obscure, a little bit more abstract, where people have to be like, huh? Is that what it was? Okay. And then again, you get like the super smart film critics who are like, oh, that was such a brilliant exposition on whatever subject matter it is. And I'm reading that same article going, what? You got that out of that movie? So this movie, when I say it's very on the nose, they're not disguising the message. And I appreciate that. Like, this is a film that is dealing with very, very on the nose of older actors and really just the obsession with young and beauty and in life, particularly in Hollywood, though, of course, and that's a real thing in Hollywood, but also with models, with just life in general. Like there's like a certain almost a stigmatism that when you hit 40 as a woman, that you can't look and do and act the same way as you did when you were 35 or 25, and suddenly it's almost like you're put out to pasture. And by the way, to be clear about this is two white dudes talking about this. Men don't have this issue. Like, men age gracefully in Hollywood. Like, there are still movies where, like, there's like 65-year-old dudes acting like they're 30-year-old dads. They just They don't. It doesn't happen. Like, Brad Pitt is 61 or 62 years old. Now, you'd never know that to look at him. He still looks very young. Right. But I've not yet once seen Brad Pitt play a grandpa. At
No.
62, he is the age of a grandfather. I'm not saying he should be a grandfather. I'm just saying that, like, Brad Pitt still looks good. He's in shape. He's obviously a very, good-looking dude. So they're still casting him to where he's like the hero, the young hero, and he's 60. Again, I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying, like, Brad Pitt doesn't deal with the same
Yeah.
kind of stigmatism that some actors. There was a tremendous documentary that came out a few years ago. I think we've talked about this on the show before. It was called Searching for Deborah Winger. And it was a documentary about an incredible actor from the 80s named Deborah Winger, who was one of the biggest stars in the world. She starred in Officer and the Gentleman, Urban Cowboy. She was like the it actor. She was she was very much the Scarlett Johansson of her era. She was in a lot of Oscar-worthy films. She was Jodie Foster. She was Amy Adams. She was a huge star. And then she hit 40. And suddenly she just disappeared. She stopped getting roles. She stopped acting. She just kind of like fell off the map. And they did a whole documentary around it called Searching for Deborah Winger, where they basically attacked that question of ageism, particularly with women in Hollywood. And it was a real thing because women in Hollywood traditionally would go from being the young, sexy ingenue, and then suddenly they would play like the elderly mom. And their roles would just dramatically change. Like there was no transition. They would just be like, oh, you're the young, sexy, hot ingenue, or now you're the elderly mother figure, grandmother figure. That was it. That was how black and white women were treated in Hollywood for a long. I mean, this isn't ancient history. This was the 80s going into the 90s with Deborah Winger.
Damon, it's right now. You just mentioned Brad Pitt. Well, his ex-wife, Angelina Jolie, when's the last time you saw her in a movie? Like, everybody stop and think about that. You were like, that Laura Croft movie. How the hell long ago was that? That was a while ago. And she's done some like little art house movies here and there. But Brad Pitt, who is, they're pretty much close to the same age.
He's older. He's older.
Right, he's old. Yeah, I guess maybe he's like 10 or 15 years older. The point is that his career has not stopped once this entire time. Brad Pitt just seems to get more and more and more work, actually, where Angelina Jolie might have hit 40 and all of a sudden, like, you don't see her. Where is she? Can you tell me? I know she's got a movie coming out soon where she plays like an opera singer. So we went from like badass, like action woman to now demure older opera singer. Like it's still going on to this day.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's the point. And again, I'm just being honest. So we're talking about this as two guys. We really have we know it from the outside looking in, but we've never experienced that. But it still happens, as you mentioned. It still happens, and it has happened. So that's what this movie is really attacking in a very brutal and very what's the word I'm looking for here? Like very accentuate. What's the word I'm looking for here? Like a very grand way, very overstated.
Oh yeah, exaggerated.
Exaggerated. Thank you. God, I don't know. Very exaggerated.
It's long days.
Way. Yeah, very exaggerated way. Where again, it's an art. It's a movie. So of course, just like any movie, when you watch Fast and the Furious and you see a car drive off a cliff and it lands perfectly on the road below, that would never actually happen. You would splat on the road, the car would explode, and you'd all be dead. But it's a movie, so of course Vin Diesel's going to land that car off the mountain and it's going to land on the road perfectly fine. So this is very much that version of this, but the story is not hard to follow. You got this actress named Elizabeth Sparkle, as you said, very big star, and then she just gets pushed out. They're like, you know what, you're 50, have a great life, have a great career. We're going to find the younger version of you to take over. And it's almost like she has a dinner, she sits down with her boss, which by the way, the boss's name, the boss's name is Harvey. That can't be by coincidence, by the way. But she has a meeting with him, and he says it in like almost like we appreciate everything you've done for us, and you've been great. We're going to move in a different direction. It's the firing speech that no one wants to hear. Like, just tell me you're firing me. It's the gentle landing. And then at the end he just like, well, have a great day, and he leaves off and like runs and goes talk to their Hollywood executive. She's sitting there like, what the fuck? And so, again, this is not a movie that's hiding or obscuring what they're talking about. It's very in your face. It's just done, as I said, in a very exaggerated, almost like a fever dream sequence, because it's all very visually shocking and stunning, and it's a body horror film. But yeah, I mean, this is a problem that has existed in Hollywood, and I appreciate that Corley Peugeot did not make this some weird, obscure story to where you're at the end, you're like, was this about ageism in Hollywood? No, this is clearly about ageism and obsession with beauty in Hollywood.
And I'm glad that she chose to make it very clear, because the stage that she sets, the visual, the atmosphere, the world that she builds is really, really odd. And we are going to take some incredible leaps, some leaps that just don't seem to make any sense in the real world. It's very heightened, very exaggerated. So she decides, she goes, okay, since all of the visuals are going to be kind of insane, I'm not going to complicate the story for you. You're going to understand the story because we are going to get fucking weird. Like, it's going to get real weird. And I was kind of waiting for that. I was like, when's it coming? When is it coming? And when it comes, oh boy, the floodgates open. Because all we'll tell you before spoilers is that once she takes this substance, she gets the perfect version of herself, right? And it's not exactly her. It's just, it's kind of like almost like it manifests what she believes would be the perfect version of herself, which is this Margaret Qualley character, Sue, who's very young, very tight, all the things that she imagines the world wants for her. And it's one of those classic stories of careful what you wish for. And I actually really love that little lunch scene with Harvey, because he's explaining to her, and meanwhile, and she uses Coralie uses a very exaggerated, like, wide angle lens pushed right up in Dennis Quaid's face to really make him look like exaggerated and weird. And he's an older guy. Dennis Quaid is in his 60s, and he's explaining to her that, what, you're 50 years old, and time's up for you, basically. And all the while he's like shelling and sucking like shrimp, and it's getting all over his mouth, and it's like, it's such great, like, visual storytelling where you're just like, he's here lecturing me on how gross it is that I'm 50, while he is completely disgusting. Like, he's sucking down shrimp, and with all this disgusting sauce all over his face, and he's this obnoxious fucking older guy telling me that I'm no good anymore. Like, it's simple and down the line, because the visuals are so heightened and so weird. It makes for what I think is a really good balance.
It's funny you say that, because that scene with Dennis Quaid, I like shrimp, by the way. I'm a shrimp fan.
I do
don't
too.
eat it every day or anything, but I like shrimp. I don't think I'll ever eat shrimp again after watching that scene. It was so utterly disgusting. He's dipping it in like some kind of weird cheese sauce. It's like this orange, like, I don't know exactly. It's not like cocktail sauce. It's like a weird orange, and it's the raw shrimp. So it's like the raw orange shrimp dipped in this weird cheese sauce, and he's just like slurping it through his teeth, and you see it dripping down. Oh, I was like, I never want shrimp again. But yeah, and that's the whole point of the Dennis Quaid character, Harvey, is that he is this older, just, he looks like a leathered old TV, Hollywood executive, the guy who has spent way too much time in tanning beds, the guy who will suck down shrimp at a meeting and not care that he's got orange sauce all over his face and fingers, and really disgusting. But it doesn't matter for him, A, because he's not on camera, and B, because he's got the power. He's the executive. He doesn't give a fuck what he looks like. He's going to judge you. But when you look at him, he looks like a slob, like a leathered old slob. But that's kind of the point, because he's the one with the power. She has no power in this situation. But watching that scene, I was like, yeah, I'm never eating shrimp again. That's good. I've had that shrimp for the rest of my life, because it was so utterly disgusting. The visuals in this film, what it reminded me of, just because of how harsh, and the close-ups and the color palettes that Corley Peugeot uses in this movie, it reminded me a lot of the heroin-induced scenes in Darren Aronofsky's film. Why am I not thinking of the name of it? The one with Jared Leto.
Everybody knows. Everybody's shouting at their podcast screen right now. They're like, "It's called this."
Why am I not thinking of this movie? I'm having a brain fart.
Requiem for a Dream.
Requiem for a Dream. Thank you. There are scenes in that movie with Jared Leto and Jennifer Connelly, and is it Sean Wayans? He's the Sean Wayans in that movie, right?
Yeah, Sean Wayne's. Yeah.
And then of course the actress who plays Jared Leto's mother in that movie, who is the great hold on, let me make sure I'm getting it right here. Why am I not thinking of her name? Why am I not thinking of her name? Ellen Burstyn from
Yes.
Exorcist. There are some feverish scenes in this. You've seen Requiem for a Dream, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
not speaking of
Yeah.
him. Where they like so Ellen Burstyn's character is addicted to these diet pills that are literally driving her insane. She's trying to lose weight to fit into a dress because she thinks she's going to go on this game show. And so like throughout the entire movie, she's sucking down these diet pills and they're literally just melting her mind, and so she's like fading into these weird dream sequences as her mind just kind of dissolves around her. And then her son, played by Jared Leto, is hooked on heroin. Him and his girlfriend, played by Jennifer Connelly, are hooked on heroin along with Sean Wayans. Or is it Sean Wayans? It's
Marlon.
Marlon Wayans. Excuse me, Marlon Wayans. And they're hooked on heroin. So this entire movie, when they're on heroin and she's on these diet pills, a lot of the scenery in Aronofsky's film dips into these weird like fever dream sequences. Lots of close-ups, lots of uncomfortable close-ups, lots of this camera movement that's very off-putting in a way. It's almost like a roller coaster ride where, in a way, it's your least favorite film found footage where the camera's just like jostling around and moving, and you're like, oh my god, my stomach's getting sick here. But that's kind of the point of what it's. I've never done heroin, but I imagine that's probably what your mind looks like when it's on heroin or when she's like whacked out on these diet pills. The way that Coralie Fairgeau shoots the substance is very similar. Like there's a lot of these disturbingly close-ups. There's these like the way they shoot and the color palettes in the movie. It reminded me, am I wrong in thinking like the way it was shot reminded me a lot of those fever dream sequences from Requiem from a Dream?
I mean, I got more Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas vibes. It was like heightened. You know what I mean? Like, and I thought that the angles and the shot choices and there's a lot of close-ups, of Demi Moore, a lot of close-ups of Margaret Qualley's body. Interestingly enough, like less her face and more her body. These things tell the story of image, right? Like just Demi Moore's character Elizabeth looking in the mirror and seeing her face and not shying away, not shying because in film we do something called beauty work where it's like okay we shoot maybe your actor or actress is having a breakout or something. You might put some beauty work on them to smooth out their face. They don't do that in this movie. You get to see people as they look. And by the way, Demi Moore looks fantastic. Like let's not be stupid here. But it's just to prove a point, right? Okay, yes, she's in her 50s. She has wrinkles on her face. Her skin is a little lower than it used to be. She's still like heads and tails above your average person walking around in the world, but in this world she examines herself in a way and she ridicules herself in a way because of how the business treats her and what it has expected of her this entire time, which was to be beautiful and perfect. And now that it's done with her, she looks upon herself in disgust, and they use the camera to induce disgust in the audience. It's a very, very clever visual motif.
Yeah, it reminded me when I say Requiem for a Dream. The scene in particular reminded me of is there's a scene late in the movie where Jennifer Connelly's character goes and visits a guy because she's hooked on drugs and she knows that he'll give her drugs. And it's played by Keith David, great character actor Keith David from The Thing and other movies. And he opens the door and this is a close up on his mouth and he goes, "Maid Mary." And he's got this weird, creepy smile. And it's just so like, oh God, this is going to go bad. Like, what's going to happen when she
Yeah.
goes in this room. And that's kind of the feeling I got with a lot of the close ups with like Dennis Quaid's character. Like, you're just like, oh man. Like, he's totally one of these casting couch douches who's going to be like, so, you want this role? Again, there's a reason why his character's name's Harvey. You want this role? Like that kind of guy. Very creepy and just like, this
Yeah.
is the guy who's going to determine whether I have a career or not. And you mentioned, of course, Demi Moore, who is, by the way, 61 years old, looks incredible for 61 years old, but they do not shy away, as you said, from showing her on camera and showing her to what she perceives, the character perceives as imperfections. And you know as well as I do that what somebody else tells you never means as much as what you tell yourself.
Yeah.
Um, there's a great comic book character. They're about to put him in the Marvel films called Doctor Doom, Doctor Victor Von Doom. And there's a version of this character, one of the many thousands of versions of this character in the comic books. He wears this giant metal mask over his face because he's deformed. So like he wears the mask to cover himself because he's deformed. And in one version of the comics, can't remember if it was a comic or a comic book, one of the versions of this character, they finally removed the mask and he has like a little tiny nick of a scar on his forehead. And that's all it is. It's literally just like a little like acne scar almost. And he's like, that because in his head, that's deformed. He is hideous. He cannot be seen by the world, so he has to wear this metal mask. In reality, though, he has a little nick on the top of his forehead.
Yeah.
You know? But that's so what I'm getting at here, it's our own perception. So while we look at Demi Moore and say Demi Moore is stunning, 61 years old, she's stunning. When she looks in the mirror in this movie, she sees herself in a certain way to where she's like, I don't like the way I look. I don't like the way I feel. And now my job that I've had for all these years in a star, they're telling me that I'm too old and I don't look good and I'm not as young and not as firm and not as supple or whatever. And so when you're watching this, you're seeing her in this mirror look at herself, you're just like, wow. And you can just see the look of disdain she has for herself, the look of self-loathing that she has for herself. And then when she takes this substance and this other part of herself is reborn, looking like Margaret Qualley, who is actually in her 20s and looks, as you said, exactly how she thinks she should look. Not the way that you or I or anyone else would perceive her, how she thinks she should look. Then it becomes a whole other world because then she's exactly what she wants to be. She's young. All the parts don't move anymore and all this different stuff. And it's bizarre to watch it unfold in this movie. Well, not bizarre, like bizarre in a good way, because as I said, nobody's perception of you means more than your own self-perception. And this is a movie that really dives into that.
It really does. Yeah. I think it's a very powerful message, and the message is moved through these powerful visuals, right? So you start with all that, all the exaggerated camera angles, and then Damon, in spoiler sections, we're going to devolve genuinely into some incredible body horror, some of the best I've seen in quite a long time.
Absolutely. With that being said, let's get into our first category of the night, and that is, of course, our best performance.
Welcome to prime time, bitch!
The Welcome to Primetime Bitch Best Performance. So, Patrick, when it comes to the substance, who gets your award for the best performance?
Well, someone who is no stranger to prime time, and that is the great Demi Moore, who plays Elizabeth Sparkle. I can see why this was such a buzzy film at Cannes. Demi Moore, I think she was defined by her looks from a very young age, from probably about 18, 19 years old when she was part of the Brat Pack. In the 80s, she was an iconic actor because of her looks. She's also a great actor. Like you see her in Ghost, and she's gonna pull a few tears out of your eyes. She's an incredibly good actor, and she's done that for years and years and years. But the world was defining her by her looks. They just were. And I'm telling you, when that script came across her desk, I know she said, I have to do this movie because I've lived it. I walk into a room, I'm better looking than anybody, and a bunch of gross old men walk up to me and evaluate me like I'm some piece of meat, like I'm livestock. That's my reality. That's Demi Moore's reality. She injects it into this character, and she goes hard in the paint. I mean, she shows why she's a great actor, honestly, because she really devolves, and she at some point becomes monstrous, if you will. You know what I mean? She's sick of herself. She's sick of the way the world treats her. She's just done. And the descent into madness in this movie is something to behold. And so I would imagine that at least 7.5 of those 13 minutes were of standing ovation were for Demi Moore's incredible performance in this film.
I think what also took me so by surprise with this film is it's a very physically demanding role, and she really attacks it physically. I was really blown away by the physicality of this role, the way she did the body horror in this movie. She did it really, really well. She's been a great actor, of course, as you mentioned, a great dramatic actor, but I was really impressed by the physicality of this role. Totally off subject. Let me throw it out to you, Patrick. What's your favorite Demi Moore movie?
I mean, I think for me it's Ghost because I've watched Ghost countless times.
For me, it's A Few Good Men. I love A Few Good Men.
Few
She's
Good
so good in
Men's
that movie.
Few Good Men's great too. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't handle the truth, Patrick. So for me, man, I listen. Let's be honest. There are three key roles in this movie. It's Demi Moore, it's Margaret Qualley, and it's Dennis Quaid. Those are really the lead actors. There are other people in this movie, but those are really the leads here.
Yeah.
And while Dennis Quaid has faded real hard into the playing the, he's faded real hard into like the political side of things, which I don't care. You can believe whatever you want to believe, vote whoever you want to vote for. I don't care. But I like Dennis Quaid a lot, and I want to be clear, like he's really good in this movie. He plays the creepy Hollywood exec to perfection. But I gotta go Margaret Qualley because Margaret Qualley, who, listen, we can't ignore the nepo babyism at all. She is Andy McDowell's daughter.
McDowell's, yeah.
Yeah, and she has been a really tremendous actor her entire career. Everything she's done, she's good in. Like, she's always a whisper away from an Oscar whenever she acts on screen. But this role, to me, demanded so much different from her because she had to play the Barbie model, perfectly young ingenue who didn't, no one was interested in what she had to say in this movie. No one was interested in her thoughts. No one was interested in her, like, breaking down the role she was playing. She is eye candy. And that's even though, again, I'm not saying Margaret Qualley is not a beautiful woman. I'm saying like she's a very dramatic actor. Like she's a very serious actor. And This role for her was something totally different because it's almost like the demeaning role that a lot of actors do get like thrown into. Like you look at Sydney Sweeney. Sydney Sweeney is like the it girl of the moment. And there are those people out there that look at Sydney Sweeney and say, oh, Sydney Sweeney, she's something great to look at. She's also a great fucking actor. Do not diminish her by just saying that she's just something good to look at. That is a horrifically bad way to look at her. But it's almost like the reverse with Margaret Qualley in this movie, where she's usually the very serious actor. Like I said, she's one whisper away from being an Oscar contender in almost everything she does. But this movie, she has to play the model. She has to play the Barbie. She has to play the young, supple ingenue that when she transforms into Sue, who is the alternate version of Elizabeth Sparkle, what does she say? Maybe like 30 lines in this movie, if that?
Oh,
like maybe 20,
maybe half.
Yeah, and it's just, and it's actually in one of the trailers or one of the clips out there, so this is not really a spoiler. And what is said is not a spoiler, anyways. There's a moment where Sue, meaning Margaret Qualley, comes face to face with Dennis Quaid's creepy executive character, and he says, "Smile. Pretty girls should always smile." Now, Patrick, I'm not saying I understand women. For our female audience out there, trust me, I don't. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I do. But there's one thing I do know about women. Would you like me to share that piece of knowledge with you?
Let's go into Damon's woman corner. I can't wait.
Never, ever tell a woman to smile. You should smile more. Why don't you smile? Just take a brick and smack yourself upside the head if you actually say that to a woman.
Some guy listening to us goes, wait, you shouldn't say that to girls? Why? We're telling you now. They don't like it.
Yeah, nobody likes that. Trust me. It is so demeaning. But yeah, in that moment when she looks at him and she does the smile, and you're just like, oh, she wants to stab him in the neck with an ice pick right now so badly. It's a completely different role for Margaret Qualley. So I was really shocked like how well she did it. Again, it just speaks to her overall talent. But this is not the typical role you would see a Margaret Qualley in.
It's not the typical Margaret Qualley role, but when it comes time for her to act her ass off, that's spoiler section territory because some things really come down the line in this movie and change. Things change big time. And when they do, that's when Margaret Qualley really gets to shine.
Yeah, she's incredible. All right, Patrick, let's move on to our next category, and that is our MVP, the Ken Foray Banana Hammock MVP Award, named after great character actor Ken Foray from the movie From Beyond, which is a body horror film by Stuart Gordon, another auteur of the body horror genre. A movie where he jumps down a flight of stairs and into a basement and kills a creature wearing nothing more than a thong bikini. If that's not an MVP performance, I don't know what is. So, Patrick, for your MVP when it comes to The Substance, who gets it?
My MVP goes to the special makeup effects artists. There were a lot to list, and I'm sure they probably enlisted a lot of different special effects artists because as the movie goes on, the craziness just keeps cranking up and up and up. I mean, just the scene where Sue is born is crazy enough. Like, you'd go, wow, great job because of what they did. And that's not nearly the craziest scene in the movie. It's just really well done makeup effects. And then it goes to the absurd, and then it goes to the insane. And a lot of that stuff I can't tell you right now, but I'll tell you when we do get to that specific category, this crew really, really shined.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the effects in this movie are incredible. And again, I don't know how much of it was practical versus digital, although I think most of it was practical. It looked very much like all practical effects for the most part. It's really well done. And you know, you and I know this from reviewing so many horror films over the year. Bad effects when you're doing a really effects heavy movie can truly ruin the film if it's not looking good. That's one of the reasons why I think, you know, I always bring this up when Damien Leone first did Terrifier, the original Terrifier, he was really just trying to show people that he could do really cool practical effects. He wasn't trying to make some grand masterpiece of horror. He was just trying to show people, like, this is what you can do with really cool practical effects, and that's why it went so extreme. Now, it caught hold. People liked it. He ended up making Terrifier 2, and now Terrifier 3 is going to be one of the biggest horror films of the year. But originally, he was just trying to show off that he could do some really cool practical effects because it can be done. And The Substance is a great example of that.
It really is, man. God, I can't wait to fucking talk about some of these effects. They're fucking gnarly.
So my MVP goes to the director and writer, Coralie Fairgeau, but not just because of this movie. Here's why I'm giving her my MVP. When I watched some interviews with her after seeing the movie, and I wanted to kind of understand her thought process. Because, again, I'd heard a lot about this movie coming out of Cannes, and much like you, Patrick, I'd seen the trailer, but I tried to avoid anything else because I want to go in cold. So after I left the movie, I started looking things up to start getting prepared for the podcast. And it wasn't until after I saw the movie that I realized that Coralie Fairgeau is the same woman who made Revenge. It's a movie that I believe is still currently on Shudder. Hey, Shudder.
Hi, Shudder.
And you can watch it right now. It's an incredible film. I didn't realize until after I saw The Substance that Revenge was also a Coralie Fairgeau movie. Brutal, brutal film. And I love a good revenge movie. It's literally called Revenge. It's a great movie. But I didn't realize it was the same director. And that came out in 2017. They started shooting The Substance in 2022. 5 years between projects. And I'd heard Coralie, I mentioned it in the intro, she had been approached after Revenge started getting kind of like critical acclaim. It wasn't a huge commercial hit, but a lot of people liked it. And so people came to her and said, hey, would you like to direct this? Would you like to do this? And she's just like, I'm not really interested in that. And so it waited until she turned 40 and got this inspiration to do The Substance that she wrote this, and now it won Best Screenplay at Cannes. And I would imagine this is going to get some Oscar nominations next year, rare horror film to get Oscar nominations. And it reminded me a little bit of another filmmaker who I really appreciate, who I really like, Emerald Fennell. Fennell did Promising Young Woman, and she just recently did Saltburn, which I think we mentioned Saltburn on this show. That is a wild movie. And Promising Young Woman was one of the best films of that year. It is such a brutal film that I've seen it once and I'll probably never watch it again. But I would tell you, like, if you haven't seen it, go see it. But the reason I compare it is because Emerald Fennell, when she made Promising Young Woman, it got nominated for Oscars out the butthole. It was all over the place. But she just didn't want to just suddenly start taking everything that got thrown at her, and she waited until she got something she really wanted to do, which ended up being Saltburn, her own thing. Now, she's gone. I think she's going to be involved with, like, the John Wick universe or something. And I'm totally, by the way, I'm not faulting anyone for taking a paycheck and doing a big Hollywood movie. By the way, I'm not faulting anyone for that. But I appreciate that Coralie Fairgeau was like, you know what, this just doesn't do it for me, doesn't interest me. And she waited until she got excited about something again, and it just happened to be her own project. And I appreciate that kind of artistic integrity to where she's just like, you know what, I'm just not interested in just making the buck. I want to make my own thing, or I want to make something that I'm really into. Nothing got presented to her that she was excited about, and so she ended up making The Substance. And again, I'm not going to fault anyone for taking the paycheck. As a matter of fact, Hollywood is a very fickle industry. Make your money. I'm not going to fault anyone for that, but I do appreciate that level of artistic integrity where she's just like, yeah, not really interested in that, not really interested in that. I'm going to wait till something really comes across my table that kind of piques my interest. Ended up being her own thing again. And so she's now made 2 films, both wildly original, both really good films. And I appreciate that kind of art. Now, again, what she does from here, I have no idea. I hope she gets 1 million offers, and I hope she takes at least 1 or 2 of them and makes $10 million. I really do. But I appreciate that she just didn't take the first thing that got thrown at her. She waited until she found something she was really into, which ended up being The Substance.
I think I figured out the common denominator with Emerald Fennell and Coralie Farragut, and then the director of Titan, who did 2 very, very unique films, and they all 3 have this philosophy of like, I'll just do something when I think it's cool. Thanks a lot, because believe me, all 3 of these people, they're fantastic writer directors, and they're in demand. All 3 are European. Now, I'm not just saying because Europeans are typical art goons, because they are. I'm saying that they have universal health care. They have a lot of like social safety net in those countries. So, and Coralie is from France. So she's like, I don't just need to go take your Hollywood paycheck. Like, I'm good here. I've got an apartment. I have full healthcare coverage. I don't really need your Hollywood paychecks. I'm just going to worry about making the best possible things. A lot of Europeans have the luxury of being able to do that. That's no soapbox. I'm just saying, like, I now see the common denominators that, yeah, French and English people, they don't need to like run for your Hollywood money. They really don't.
And listen, there are the rare exceptions where there are directors and writers in Hollywood that only do what they want to do. I think the perfect example of that is Quentin Tarantino. You know, I mean, Tarantino.
Jordan Peele.
Yeah, and again, and rightfully so. They've made movies that are big enough and widely loved enough to where they're just like, yeah, I'm not gonna do whatever you throw at me. Like I'm sure after Pulp Fiction, Quentin Tarantino could have directed anything on earth they would have thrown to him and said, direct this for us, Quentin. He's like, yeah, I'm not really interested. I'm gonna go make this movie called Jackie Brown that was, that's based on a book called Rum Punch, and I'm just gonna adapt that and do my own thing. And then I'm gonna go make this, and I'm gonna go make this crazy, wild, bloody kung fu movie called Kill Bill Part 1 and 2. Like there are those rare exceptions where and again, the Martin Scorsese's of the world, they get everything thrown at them and they can pick and choose what they decide to do, what they decide to adapt. And I'm not saying that Coralie Farragut or Emerald Fennell are too haughty-taughty to listen to offers or they're so above the industry to where they wouldn't accept an offer. I'm just saying that I appreciate that they're just honest enough to say, yeah, I'm just not into doing that. And I'm not going to do it. And I'm going to wait and do something on my own. And they did their 2 own things, Revenge and The Substance. And in Emerald Fennell's case, Promising Young Woman and Saltburn are both really good films. So credit to them. It's a rare thing. I mean, it is a rare thing in this industry to just say, yeah, you know what? Because, you just get offered things. You're like, yeah, I'm just going to take it because that's what you do in this industry. And I appreciate they're just like, yeah, I'm good.
And usually that when a director takes that route, they usually end up just putting out interesting film after interesting film, and it only seems to get better. So looking forward to whatever Coralie's got next.
Absolutely. All right, folks, it is now time to get into spoilers. So if you haven't seen The Substance, it is in theaters right now. If you can't tell by what Patrick and I have already said on this podcast, him and I both seem to really enjoy this film. So yeah, go see it. It's in theaters right now. I would recommend it. It is a wild. I posted on Instagram the night I saw it, and I was like, tonight's horror movie, and this was a wild movie. I said, holy shit, this is a wild ass movie. And you messaged me like, yes, it is. It is a wild movie.
Yes, it is.
Highly recommend going to see it. So go see The Substance in theaters right now. We are officially into spoiler territory. So again, if you haven't seen this, come back when you have, or again, if you just don't care, we're going to get into spoilers. Patrick, where should we start with spoilers in this movie? Because this is such a wild, I don't want to keep using the same word, but it is a wild movie.
It is wild, and I think what we talked about in the non-spoiler section is pretty much the movie. Where it takes a turn is that what you realize is that taking the substance is a very interesting, strange, elaborate process. Once Elizabeth takes this substance, she's like, "Ah, I guess it didn't do anything." And then before you know it, she's like totally tripping out. She falls onto her bathroom floor, and you can see that she starts like splitting, like literally splitting, like her pupils split, and also you're like, oh, something else is happening to her. And then her back opens up, and Margaret Qualley comes spilling out of the back, looking like a brand new newborn 25-year-old version of Margaret Qualley, pops out of the back, and you learn that there's a very strict set of rules. You get 7 days to be Sue. The other 7 days you have to trade back to becoming Elizabeth. You got to do special feeding. You got to like suck out certain, like every day you have to suck out a little bit of juice from Elizabeth's spine to keep you going. And then when Sue is down, Elizabeth has to do that to her spine, back and forth. So, hey, she breaks out. She's Margaret Qualley. She's loving the new body she's in. She looks young. She looks great. And hey, my old boss who fired me says they're looking for someone young and hot. Why don't I go in and apply for my old job? She gets in there. Oh, they love her, Damon. They're so happy to see her. Look at this young, beautiful young lady. Come on in here. They're so excited to roll the red carpet out for her. And they make her a star yet again. So Elizabeth sitting inside of Sue. And this is important to note, Damon. The people who run the substance, which are always mysterious and always just on the phone, they make it very clear. You are not two different people. Sue is Elizabeth. Elizabeth is Sue. You are the same thing. Do not get that mixed up. Do not think you are someone else when you're this. But Elizabeth is sitting inside of Sue going, great, I just get to keep being me. But on that 7th day, it's almost like midnight for Cinderella. She has got to rush back, do the transfer procedure, and wake up Elizabeth. And Elizabeth has to live in her body for 7 days. Well, much like Damon, I know you haven't done heroin, and I'm not saying I have. I'm just saying that I've done things similar to. The next day, coming off that heroin high, you're just like, yo, that sucked. Or that sucks that I'm not on heroin anymore, is kind of the vibe. And that's how Elizabeth is feeling back in her old body. She's just like, man, I really liked being Sue. It was nice. Everybody was treating me like how they had treated me my whole life. Everybody was looking at me the way I liked people to look at me. And I was getting all that validation that I just lost not too long ago. And so she just kind of mopes around for a week because she can't wait to get back into Sue's body. So she just sits around the house. She eats, she watches TV. And then she jumps back into Sue's body. And she's back in that body, and then she goes and she does her big TV show, and now she's blowing up. She's becoming a star. Now Sue's billboard is right outside of Elizabeth's apartment window, and so you can see her stars on the rise so quickly. And Damon, what happens? We get a little greedy, don't we? We just enjoy being in that brand new fresh body. I know mine hurts right now. My head is heavy. My legs are tired. My hips are tight. I sure would like a young, spry body. I would trade bodies with Margaret Qualley right now, even though I'm a man. Like, it's just like, yeah, it might feel good to be in a nice, young, supple body, right? That might be good. So when she's back in Sue, she decides, what if I just stayed up just a little bit later? I know I got to go at midnight. What if I just took a little more juice? And she takes a little more juice. Okay, and then she has a good night. She has some fun with some guy that she meets. And all right, fine, I'll put myself back. She puts herself back, and she wakes up in Elizabeth's body, and one of her fingers looks straight out of like the witch. I mean, like a hag finger, like a proper hag finger. She's like, whoa, what the fuck is this? She calls up the substance. She's like, what the fuck? One of my fingers is all super weird. And they're like, yeah, don't fuck around with the formula. At the 7-day mark, you need to switch, or your body irreversibly ages like that. She's like, oh, okay, cool. Good to know. Thank you. And believe me, Elizabeth doesn't need to feel any more insecure than she already feels. So she's walking around with a glove on because she got this hag finger. She jumps back into Sue's body after 7 days and, oh, what if I just stayed a few more days? And then Damon, her star's on the rise. The executives want more of her. Hey, Sue, You know what we think you should do? We think you should do the New Year's Eve show, the big show of the year. Meanwhile, who gives a shit about New Year's Eve shows anymore? But, again, this is that weird world. And Sue decides, I'm going to try to live in this body as long as I possibly can. She's going to break all the rules. And Damon, it doesn't go well.
She drains every last ounce of, what do they call it? They actually call it, there's actually a word for it.
Activation fluid or something?
Yeah, some kind of fluid, and it's just like, it's like it's like a stabilization fluid. I think it's
stabilization,
yeah.
Yeah,
Stabilizer. And she has to take 7 days worth of stabilizer out of the Elizabeth body, and then each day inject a little bit into the Sue body to keep her going. Like it's like gas for an engine. And the reverse is true when Elizabeth is there. She takes it from Sue. They just kind of like keep exchanging fluids. But once Sue's like, you know what? I like this too much, man. This heroin is fucking awesome. I feel great when I'm on this. And the only way, I've never done heroin the way I did. I've told this story before. I got into a car accident when I was a kid, and they gave me Percocets. And I was on Percocets for like 2 days, and I was like, holy shit, I can really see how people get hooked on painkillers. Like after 2 days, I was like, my God, this is like candy. This is awesome. And I was like, no more of this. Got to put that to the side. But I immediately, after like 2 days on Percocet, I was like, oh my God, I see how people get hooked on this stuff. So it's like that. She's just like, you know what? What's one more day? And then what's one more day? And then she's like, you know what? I only got 3 months until New Year's Eve. I'm just going to take out 3 months. And she literally sucks out 3 months worth of fluid. And she's right on the cusp of her New Year's Eve when she runs out of fluid. Nothing else is coming out of Elizabeth. And she calls the substance and says, I'm out. And she's like, well, you got to switch bodies. It's the only way to regenerate the stabilizer fluid. Only way to do it. And so she does. And when Elizabeth wakes up, she is bald and old. She's a hunchback. She's haggard. She looks like she's 85 years old, broken down, beat down body. I mean, it is the first, like one of the many stages of body horror in this, when she transforms back into Elizabeth. She's like, what did you do to me? Oh my God. Like she's like a hag. And like, I mean, she literally, again, she looks like something out of The Witch. And so she decides, I'm just going to terminate this thing. Like, I can't do this anymore. This is too much. And so she calls the program and says, I want out. And they're like, okay, well, come get this thing. It's called termination fluid. You pump it into your double, and that ends it. You're free to go. Okay, so she does it. She starts pumping in the termination fluid into Sue, and about halfway through, she's like, I can't let this go. I can't let the younger feeling go. And she stops, and Sue actually wakes up, and then they end up in a fight. She kills Elizabeth, and then there's no more stabilizer fluid, so you can imagine things start really going wrong for Sue at that point. And then, that just spirals into the rest of the movie. But, yeah, it really becomes a movie that we're addicted to beauty. We're addicted to the way we feel about ourselves. When she actually gets that younger version of herself, the younger version's like, I don't want to let this go. As you said, this is a feeling I don't want to give up. This is an addiction. Everyone loves me. Everyone stares at me. Everyone thinks I'm the hottest, youngest, just greatest thing on earth. I don't want to give that up to go back in that old body for 7 days, so fuck that. I'm just going to keep living. But, per the rules of the substance, it doesn't work out that way. And so that's when shit really goes hairy after that.
Right. There's a price to pay, right? There's a price to pay for your addiction. And it's interesting, like even when Sue is going around, eventually she's getting evaluated too. Like you can't really escape that aspect of it. There's a scene where she's got this new cool updated workout routine. It's a lot of twerking, a lot of ass jiggling and all that shit. And like at one point, everybody, they pause and they go, wait, we need to see what's going on. And she felt like something in her ass like poke out. Again, we're dealing with body horror here. They pause the screen and there's like, it's just a very super tight close up on her ass. And all the men, including like the stage hands and everybody, they go up and they're like evaluating her ass to see what that could have been, what that anomaly might have been. And it's like, even in that body, Sue is still getting evaluated by people. But when she decides to go all in and suck the life out of Elizabeth, and basically at the New Year's Eve show, it all falls apart. When you can't stabilize anymore, you turn into Damon. I don't know, what do you call it? The Thing?
Well, so now hold on. Don't forget the other part of this. So when she runs out of the fluid, she decides when you first get this kit of the substance, there's this little vial. It says Activator. It's a one use only.
Oh,
You
that's
use
right.
it,
Yes.
you inject it, and that's what makes you split into two people. And it says
Yeah.
one use only. Get rid of the rest. Throw away. She
Right.
doesn't. Elizabeth doesn't get rid of it, so she goes back and she's like, okay, so Elizabeth's dead. I killed her, but I still need this. I still need this body. I need this stabilizer fluid. What if I just split myself into another person?
Right.
And so she re-injects herself with the activator, and shit goes completely haywire because you can't split a split, and it already said one use only. And so what actually comes out of Sue ends up being what they call Monstro Elisa or Eliza Sue or something
Elisa
like that.
Sue, yeah.
Elisa Sue, and it's a weird, just gigantic, monstrous version of both Sue and Elizabeth, and it's horrific, and that's when the full body horror like really, really goes for it at that point. And she ends up showing up at New Year's Eve, and she's trying to do her routine. Everyone's like, "What the fuck?" And then she ends up getting her head chopped off, and blood goes everywhere all over the audience, and it's just it goes full fever dream at that point. Like it's just blood spraying everywhere, and the ending is the head part of the back of Monstro Eliza Sue is actually Elizabeth's old head, and you see it crawl to the star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame where Elizabeth Sparkle's star has been there for years. And at the very beginning of the movie, they show her getting her star, and then over the years, it's cracked, it's beat up. People are just like shitting on it. Like they just don't care because it's not special anymore. And so the end of the movie is this weird glob of Elizabeth, like basically crawls itself over to the star, and she looks up and she kind of dies. And the very next scene is the street sweeper in the morning comes and literally just sucks it away, and that is the end of Elizabeth Sparkle. The ending is a little bizarre, I'm not gonna lie, but I understood what they're going for. Literally, of just like she was so desperately trying to hold on to this fame and this adoration she received from people. And then even in that moment when people are like freaked out and scared and terrified of her and she runs away and gets killed, even in that moment she tries to crawl back to who she used to be, and that's crawling back to that star on the Walk of Fame. She dies, and then she's just forgotten because she gets swept up by a street sweeper. And the point of it is she went through all this, everything she put herself through, and at the end of the day, nobody gives a fuck. Nobody cares.
No,
she just gets swept away,
cares.
and we're going to move on to the next Sue. We're going to move on to the next Elizabeth Sparkle. And that's kind of the point of the movie.
Yeah, the point is don't follow that trap. That trap is not going to lead you anywhere. You're just going to get sucked up at like any other piece of scuzz on the Hollywood Boulevard, and that's what happens to her. You know, it's a cautionary tale, a little bit on the nose, but not in a bad way, in my opinion, in a completely good way, just to show the ugliness of the pursuit of beauty, and I like that.
No, and I really appreciate, like I said, because listen, if I had one major complaint about this movie, and it's not much because I really did enjoy this film. It's that it's a little long. It's like 2 hours and 20 minutes long.
Yeah.
Which is an exceedingly long movie. And if I had one criticism overall, it would be they could have chopped out about 25 to 30 minutes of this and just like shortened some of the scenes. Because like when you get to the last like 45 minutes, which is when Elizabeth is reborn in this like old, haggard, broken down 85, 90-year-old body, and she's just like, I'm done, I'm going to kill Sue. And then she can't go through with it. She can't give up this younger version of herself. Sue wakes up and they end up fighting. She ends up killing Elizabeth, and then it's just Sue by herself and then this other monstrous form. It just keeps going and going and going. And then by the time you get to the monster version, she goes on stage and she's dancing with all these other nude dancers. And like the whole audience is just like creepy men. And like they're all watching her and like expecting to see this. Like they're basically like, put on a show for us, dance for us. And, smile for us. All pretty girls smile. And she goes on stage. It's this big monstrous form. It drags on a little bit. Like you could have gone from Elizabeth dying to the end of the movie in about 20 minutes, and it kind of stretches out to like 40 minutes. It's a little long.
It is a long movie. And it's weird. It's like it's not it's got like 3 locations. It's got Elizabeth's apartment, the studio, and like the walk between her apartment and the place where she gets her substance. And that's it. That's the whole, like, there's 3 or 4 locations in this entire movie, and it's a 2.5 hour movie. So that really starts to wear on you after a while. It's still very visually striking. It's an incredibly, like, wow, like colorful, bright, big movie in that respect. And of course, the effects are so disgusting. I mean, I have one of the biggest monstrous lists of body horror stuff that I've ever accumulated in my notes. And it just keeps going. It keeps ramping up on all this wonderful, glorious body horror. But yeah, it could have been a little bit shorter because the message was clear. I think that was the big thing is like, I know where this is going. I know where it's ending up. We should just get here a little bit faster.
Yeah, they do. The movie's kind of told in 3 chapters because when you first start the movie, they flash on the screen Elizabeth Sparkle, and that's where you meet Demi Moore's character. And then when she splits, then there's a big screen that says Sue. And so you kind of see like the second version of Elizabeth being Sue, and then we kind of live her story for a while. And as we already mentioned, she kind of, she gets obsessed with being Sue. She doesn't want to give it up, and so she basically kills Elizabeth for Sue to live. And then once that happens and she actually does kill Elizabeth, then you get Monstro Elizasu, and then it's like another big flash, and then you get into the third act. The third act just drags a little bit. It's not bad. It's actually, again, very good movie, very poignant movie, and a very, very compelling message.
Very hilarious, by the way. Like, it's funny. It's a funny movie. It is not a movie that takes itself seriously at all. It knows how to lean into the lunacy of it all.
But the third act to me felt like it dragged on because everything right up to the point when Sue kills Elizabeth and like they get into the big fight, she ends up killing her, and now it's just Sue by herself, but she's deteriorating because there's no more stabilizer fluid. That's all really good. It's just when the Monstro Elizasu emerges, it just feels like there's a little, it feels like it drags a little bit much. So like I said, the third act to me made sense. I didn't hate it. The story was great and the actual ending was fine. I got the message of it all. It just felt like it dragged a little bit.
Yeah, I could see that.
With that being said, Patrick, let's move on to our next category, which is Best Body Horror. Now, to be clear, we're going to pick one, but we could pick like 20.
Oh my God.
This has got to be one of the most gruesome, and by gruesome, I mean awesome body horrors that we've seen in years. Like you mentioned David Cronenberg, and I mentioned Stuart Gordon. Like both of those guys, like Stuart Gordon sadly is no longer with us, but they would both be like standing ovation for this movie.
Yeah.
Like this would be, like they were in that 13-minute audience at Cannes, like giving them a standing ovation. Because this is, while it is a more poignant story of today's age, it's not just a straight up horror film. There is a message in this movie. Again, what we already explained. This is a straight up body horror, and it is fucking brutal body horror.
Yeah, I mean, it goes from little things like really graphic, like sewing, like Sue sewing up Elizabeth. Like it's not, there's nothing crazy about it. It's just like, man, we're really gonna get close in and show you hook this needle through this skin and all that stuff, to like, the nail breaking back and those little things. And then it just goes into like exploding heads, people being bathed in like fire hoses worth of blood, and then Damon, I'll just tell you right now, my best body horror, of course, was Monstro Lisa Sue, which she's just this amalgamation of all the wants and needs of Elizabeth and Sue in this monstrous form with arms bent back and one breast over here and the other one way over there, and the head smashed down and cranked this way and the eye this way and everything that way. And at one point, Elisa Sue barfs a boob out of her eyeball. Like, this is the kind of nutty shit that's happening in this movie. Like, it just goes, how much more disgusting can we get?
Remember the scene in RoboCop when the guy gets the toxic waste dumped on him, and then he comes out and he's like, he's like comes in the car and he's all fucked up. That's kind of what a Monstro Eliza suit looks like. Just like arms here, legs here. There's a part of Elizabeth's head in the back, which you actually see is like Demi Moore's head in the back. There's an arm sticking out here.
Oh my God, Damon, the Demi Moore head in the back. I'm glad you brought it up. So yeah, Monstro Eliza Sue's walking around, and behind it on her back is literally, I mean, it looked like Demi Moore's face. Like whoever did the work did perfect job. It really looks like her face just in a perpetual scream. And like she'd put the blue ball gown over it, and you could see her face through that sheer lace in the ball gown, screaming in a perpetual scream. I mean, so much creativity in this, and so much like commentary built into the creativity.
Yeah, it was really, really, really cool. And like I said, this is in terms of body horror, and I'll be honest, like I'm not a massive body horror guy. Like again, I'm a big Stuart Gordon fan. I think that's well documented. I love From Beyond, and Reanimator is one of my all-time favorite films. But I'm not like traditionally, like I wouldn't say body horror is like a genre of horror that I adore overall. This might be one of the best body horror films ever, just because they put so much work into the effects of this movie. It is really, really incredible. And even if you get lost in the story, and you know me as the story guy, even if you get lost in that and it doesn't appeal to you for whatever reason, the body horror. I mean, again, if you like Terrifier, you like great effects, this movie will blow you away. It is that good. So for me, you're right. Monster Elizasu is like it's almost like, they're basically like, hey, we've done everything. Here's where you're going to give us our Oscar for effects, because this thing is just fucking wild. But I'm going to go back earlier in the film, and because I'm actually going to go to the initial splitting of Elizabeth and Sue, because the very opening of the movie is a moment where you see the substance in a syringe, and they inject it into a yolk of an egg, and the yolk like shakes and grows and then just kind of splits into two, and that really just kind of sets the stage for what the movie actually becomes. But when Elizabeth injects herself with the activator fluid, and she's like, oh, what? Nothing happened. And then she starts convulsing, and she's like in pain, and she's doubled over. And when her back splits open, because again, you have no idea what this actually does. It tells you it's going to be a younger version of yourself, but you don't know what that means. Like in your head, you got to be thinking, I'm going to transform like Jekyll and Hyde, like a werewolf. I'm going to transform into this younger version. No, you're literally giving birth to another version of yourself. And so that initial scene when her back splits open and you see Margaret Qualley like crawl out of her back, like through the ooze and the, and the goo and everything, it is really disturbing and super creative, because I don't know that I've really seen anything like that. And I think it works so well because you don't know what's coming. You have no idea how this is going to happen. And once it actually happens, you're like, oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's like Coralie Farge was just like, let's just make every moment as disgusting as possible. Like let's make you disgusted for like the process. Like you should be disgusted with the process of trying to stay beautiful. It's because it's a mute point. We're all going to age. We're all going to die. Like stop fighting it in such a dramatic way. So I need to show you how ugly it can be to pursue like eternal beauty. And it is. You're just like, I'm sitting there going, is this even worth it? Like if I was given the instance to have the substance, would I even go through this? Because it looks like fucking hell. And that's the point. She wants you to think of it like that, where it's like even the process of like having to do the feedback and having to do the activators and all this stuff. It's just showing like there's so much process in this shit. Is it really even fucking worth it?
Yeah, and it's like taking everything that a lot of women are unfortunately almost forced into doing because they got to feel like they got to stay young, and it's as we said, it's exaggerating that. It's extenuating circumstances of everything, like the injections, literally stabbing it in her back and pulling out spinal fluid that she has to then inject into herself every day. It is so gross and so off-putting, but these are the links that we're like, you know what? We need you to be younger. We need you to be more pretty. We need you to have less wrinkles and no gray hair and all this. And it's just like, holy shit. And this is, again, that exaggerated version of that, but it is pretty brutal. But when Sue is born, it is wild because you don't know what's coming. And when her back splits open, you're like, oh, okay, this is how we're going to do this. And she like crawls out of the ooze, and she like rebirth into a second form. And you're just like, what did I just witness? What did I just see? So that was mine. Patrick, would you like to go through some of the other body horror scenes we didn't get to touch on because there's so many in this movie?
Oh my, there's one where it's like Margot Qualley or Sue is on top of this guy, right? They're having a hookup night and she's enjoying her new young body, and she's thinking about, hooking up with this guy. She's in this like tight leather like singlet, and he goes to unzip it, and like her whole back explodes with like blood and guts, and it's like her mind destabilizing. That's what it happens, right? So she realizes she has to go and get some more stabilizer. So that's one. The other one is what I love is that motif of Elizabeth always like kind of just eating and being lazy. At one point, she cooks like a gigantic, like an entire cookbook worth of French cuisine. At one point, she puts like a piece of rotisserie drumstick inside her body so that when Sue wakes up and she's doing her workouts on TV, like a drumstick like starts to stick its way out of her ass. So she goes into like a fucking like into her dressing room and pulls a drumstick out of her belly button, like just like it's just fucking weird, like it's just disgusting, like but like again it's laying it right out in front of you, like if I could I would pull food out of my body so I didn't have to look a certain way. Like that's how desperate I'd be to do this stuff. And you want to mention like all those times that she overused the stabilizer fluid because she's got to stick it into her back, kind of like I forget what it's called, but she's got to stick it into her back with this big thick needle and keep injecting. Well, if you keep going to the same injection site over and over and over and over again, and it never heals, it starts to look real disgusting, blackened, pustule, infected, and they don't shy away from it. And there's gooey sounds, there's squelchy sounds. Like they really try to immerse you in the disgustingness of it all.
Yeah, it's going back to Requiem for a Dream. It is the scene where Jared Leto tries to put the needle in his arm, and his arm has gotten so infected it's gone gangrene, and you're like, "Oh Jesus Christ!" They end up actually amputating his arm in the movie. It's like that. That's what that hole looks like. It is so. It is. It literally is like a drug addiction person who's a drug addict who just gets infected from needles, and that's what happens. Like the hole, the actual injection site gets infected. There's also some other really gross, but also like kind of saddening body horror scenes when Elizabeth, a couple of times when Elizabeth wakes back up and her body's starting to be ravaged by Sue taking more and more of the stabilizer fluid for more and more days. So her body, like the first time you mentioned, it's like the old hag finger, and then it's like her entire leg turns into like an old hag leg. And at one point, she's sitting in her chair and she's trying to get up, and she has to like move her kneecap to get it into place so she can stand up again, and you hear like the crack and the move, and like, oh, it's so disgusting when she like literally has to jostle her kneecap back in place to stand up from her little like lazy boy, and it's just like, oh my god, it's brutal. There's a lot in this movie, man. It's not all just blood and guts. Like I said, it's not all just blood and guts. The body horror of Elizabeth aging and like the rapid aging parts are pretty gross too. So yeah, it's really well done. It's a pretty, like I said, it's pretty adventurous body horror.
It is, man. I want to guess that maybe 12 of the 13 minutes of that standing ovation was Dave Cronenberg somewhere in that audience going, "Bravo, bravo!" Like this is so amazing.
And I don't know. I think I saw on here the actual budget for this movie, and I don't know if this is true or not. I'm going by Wikipedia, so I don't know if this is actually true. They said the budget was 17.5 million. I think taking out salaries for Demi Moore and like Dennis Quaid and Margaret Qualley, like 12 million had to just be on the effects because that is because you just said the whole movie takes place in basically 3 locations. Really, I mean, even when you talk about like, when she goes to pick up the substance, it's in like some little hole in the wall in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And that's a nothing location. It's Elizabeth's apartment. It's the studio, and that's pretty much really it. So yeah, like all the money went into the actual effects. So the 17, if it was a $17 million budget, I'd say about 12 million went into the actual body effects of this movie.
Guaranteed. I would guess that they shot the whole thing on one soundstage and they just did a couple of street exteriors, like real simple ones, probably right by the studio. Like genuinely, like you can tell it's a very simple film, but man, they spent their money well because those effects look great.
They do. All right, Patrick, our next category, this is an interesting one because this is a movie that deals with a woman, woman facing her own mortality and her own age and feeling like she needs to face and become a younger version of herself. And so what she envisions as the perfect version of Elizabeth Sparkle becomes Sue, this young, toned, good-looking, gorgeous younger woman who can take over her workout videos during the day, which, as you said, so bizarre because like that doesn't happen today. But that was a thing in the 80s, by the way. It was very much a thing in the 80s.
Very big, yeah.
Very big in the 80s. So, Patrick, this next category is, who is your duplicate and what does he do? Because if we injected ourselves with Activator, what would be the young, supple version of Damon and Patrick? So, Patrick, if you inject that Activator fluid, who's popping out of your back?
Well, I would say that mine is definitely going to be taller than me and leaner than me because I'm neither of those things. And then he'd be a rock star, right? Like what would my job be? Like, I love being a filmmaker, but I get to film make. I'm kind of doing that, so I get to do that. But I always wanted to be a rock star. So I'd be like, I'd like to be like a tall, lean, Chris Cornell looking motherfucker. And then I said, eventually he'll end up, loving that body and he'll just beat me to death with a flying V guitar like Jason in Jason Takes Manhattan.
Yeah, so the rock star Patrick. Do you have a name? Sue, what would your rock star name be?
Oh shit, I don't know. I didn't think that far ahead.
Come on now, you gotta come up with what's a good rock star name? You gotta come is it like Remington or like
Remington?
Leaf, like Leaf.
Leif. Yeah, I have no idea.
I feel like that's got to be it. So for me, mine would just be the tall. I'm 6'3", so I don't have a problem with the tall part, but like the incredibly in shape young guy with like perfect hair and perfect everything, and he's a writer and director in Hollywood, and a very famous writer and director in Hollywood. And of course his name would have to be Quentin, because why not?
Yeah.
And
Quentin Damon Dino.
He is everything that everything I've ever dreamed of being, the perfect filmmaker, the writer, the filmmaker who everyone wants to work with and everyone dreams of working with. And when he finally realizes that, Damon is dragging him down a little bit, he just takes one, like, when they do like the celebrations, when you sign a big contract, they give you the pin and you sign it. It's like a special pin. Yeah, he would take one of those things and just jab it into my thorax and that'd be the end of me. The symbolism of a writer stabbing himself with a pin is pretty on the nose. So
I love that, Damon. Keeping it in line with Corley's messaging. Yes,
exactly. So yeah, the pin right to the throat, and then I go bye, and my other younger Quentin self goes out and makes his Oscar movie, or he probably dies and becomes Monstro Dama Quentin and
Dama Quentin.
Dama Quentin, and dies a horrible death. Patrick, next category: remake, sequel, or leave it alone. Of course, this is pretty self-explanatory, but for this one, because we don't have it every single week, this is a category where we take the movie we're watching and we basically say, should they remake it, should they sequelize it, or should they just leave it alone? So when it comes to the substance, Patrick, remake, sequel, leave it alone.
Damon, I'm actually going to go with sequel, because I think like this idea can be played out many, many, many different ways. And I'm sure Corley probably abhors sequels. She's probably like, oh my God, are you kidding me? I would never do anything like that. But the idea of like some other, next time it could be a man, next time it could be somebody else, and you can change up the venue. It doesn't have to be a TV star. It could be something, it could be a rock star. It could be something else. But you can keep playing in this world a little bit. Like, you don't have to play in it forever. But I think this lends itself to sequels.
It's funny you mentioned Rockstar. I always remember that scene in Almost Famous, which is one of my all-time favorite movies, when Jimmy Fallon's character comes in and he's talking to the band, and he's just like, because you gotta make it when you can, while you can. Because you think Mick Jagger's gonna be dancing and shaking up on stage when he's 50 years old, you got another thing coming. And then Mick Jagger's like 90 and he's still doing it right now. Which obviously that was the joke of the movie, but it was funny because like Mick Jagger is still like, I always hear there's a comedian that does a joke. He's like, when the world ends and a nuclear bomb that goes off, all that's going to be left are cockroaches and Keith Richards. Like that dude's just never going to die. Like that dude's never going to die. Listen, you're right. Like, it would be interesting to see how they could explore that in another avenue, but I'm just going to go with the obvious answer, which is leave it alone, because this is a really, really well-made film with a really important message at the heart of it. And as I said, one of the things I love most about this movie is it isn't obscure, it isn't abstract, it isn't trying to make you think about what the message is or where you have to go home and decode it like some sort of Da Vinci fucking code puzzle or something. It tells you what it is. If you can't figure this one out, we need to have a lot longer discussion. But this movie it really does beat you over the head with what it is, and in a good way. And so I get the message. So I don't really need to see it again. I think, I think there's other versions of this movie, like you said, it could be made, absolutely. But I think this one's so strong, and you get such good performances from Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley. And again, as I mentioned, Dennis Quaid is fantastic. He plays the creepy studio exec to perfection. Like, literally perfection. I would have loved to see, I'm a big Ray Liotta fan. I would have loved to have seen what Ray Liotta did with that role, but Dennis Quaid is great in that role. So it's like, I don't really need to see it again because you kind of nailed it with this one.
This is a perfect blend of a crazy, avant-garde, strange movie with a message that is super easy to digest. Like, what more do you want? Like something that's wild and crazy and nutty, and you won't have any questions at the end.
Yeah.
That sounds like a win-win. That sounds like the perfect date night for Damon and Patrick.
Exactly. Next category, Patrick, can we survive this horror film? Now, this is an interesting question because in this particular situation, we can't be Elizabeth or Sue because, as I said earlier in the show, when we talk about an important subject matter like ageism and the standards of beauty, so to speak, for Hollywood, men don't deal with it nearly at the same level as women. Now, I'm not saying men don't, by the way. I want to be clear. There definitely is. I mean, there are definitely men who deal with it, just not to the extreme that women deal with it, or at least have dealt with it for the last 50 years. So inject yourself as a man in this situation. Not saying you're a Sue or Elizabeth, just, you're the man in this situation. Are you making it out of here?
I posed this question this time because while I was watching it, I really did have to think about whether I would take the substance or not. Because truth be told, Damon, I am aging rather rapidly. Having kids has probably sucked a good 10 years out of me right away. It's like choosing the wrong grail. Like, you chose poorly. Now I'm aging into a husk of a person. So I was like, it would be nice to get like 10, 15 years back. You're telling me I get 20 years back? That sounds really good. It sounds like a good idea. That's really kind of where I was going with this question, where I was like, will I take the substance? Because you actually meet another person who took the substance in this movie, the doctor, and he's not going to make it out. When you do your little substance person, your substance double is going to eventually overtake you. They can't help it. They want to stay young. They want to stay nubile. So they just suck the life out of you. And I was just more of a matter of like, could I resist taking the substance? Damon, the answer is no. I would definitely take it. And I'd end up, again, still a withering husk.
So it's funny. That was where you're posing the question. And the reality is I'm with you. I'd be dead too, because little secret about me, I'm terrified of aging. I don't like it at all. I don't like being reminded, like when my birthday passes, I'm like, just ignore it. I didn't get older. I'm the same age I was last year. I don't like it. I don't know what it is. I can't explain it. A lot of people age gracefully. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't bother them. Like, oh, I'm 40 now. Who cares? Like, whatever. I'm 40. Who gives a shit? It terrifies me. It really does. Like, I'm not terrified of my own mortality. Like, not like that. Like, not of like I'm scared of dying. I mean, I think everyone on some level is scared of dying, but I don't want to give up being who I was when I was in my 20s and even my 30s. You know what I mean? So I am that person. I'll be the first to admit I'm terrified of getting older. When that prospect does scare me. So yeah, 100%. I'd 100% do it, and I'd 100% overdo it, and I'd 100% turn into a husk, and I'd 100% die from it. I know, because I have that real fear of myself. It's not that other people are putting it on me. It's me putting it on me. It's, as I said, no one's perception of you matters as much as your own perception of yourself. And for me, I'll fully admit, I am terrified of getting older. So yeah, I would inject myself, and within 3 months, I'd probably be dead.
That's a resounding no across the board.
Yeah, at least I'm honest enough to say it. At least I'm honest to say, I can't resist. Yeah, like I said, and also, by the way, I'm not saying this is a good idea, but I'm just saying, like, Could you imagine having like a good 6 months of just being this fucking 25-year-old Patrick again? Like
Yes.
just a,
Yes, I can. 100% I can. And I would make use of it. I guarantee you. I wouldn't even make the 7 days. At day 7 where you got to go, I go, I'm just sucking the life out of that motherfucker. Fuck him. Fuck Patrick. I'm going to stay young forever.
Yeah, dude, I'm telling you, man. Like I said, and we're of the age now where like age is a real thing for us. So it's just like, yeah, you know what? Like, I'm not 25 anymore, but boy, would I like to be 25 again.
Nobody guesses I'm in my 30s anymore. I can tell you that.
Yeah, so like I said, at least we're honest enough to admit it.
Yeah.
Patrick, our final category this week, of course, as always, is it scary? I'll go first on this one. So this is truly a body horror film. And if you know what body horror is, it is exactly what it sounds like. It is horrific atrocities being carried out on the human body, for lack of a better explanation.
There it is.
This is that. So, as I always say when I talk about this category, is it scary? There's levels of this. Is this the kind of movie that's going to make you run screaming out of the theater because it scares you, like Hell House LLC or some movie like that? Absolutely not. But if you're squeamish about body horror, if you're squeamish about really gross body effects, you are going to be cringing and squirming in your seat and asking for the exit because it is fucking brutal. It is really brutal, and it is so in your face that you just like it's just there the entire film, and it just ratchets up throughout the entire movie. As I said, even going from that early scene where Elizabeth births out Sue, it's brutal. So yeah, if you're a person that's like squeamish about body horror, this is going to be like your nightmare. This is going to be like your nightmare revisited here.
Yeah, it's a super, super gory movie. Some horror people don't like gore, and this is not going to be the movie for you. It's covered in gore. It's not a traditionally scary movie. In fact, it's rather funny. It's quirky. I kind of like maybe like Tim Burton-ish kind of humor. Like it's odd. Everybody in the world is kind of twisted and different and weird, but it's about disgusting you on purpose. It's about making you feel disgusted, and it does a really good job at that.
And if you can watch this film and still want to eat shrimp afterwards, we need to have a real long talk because, man, Dennis Quaid, you turned me into a non-shrimp eater for the rest of my life. That scene is so gross. Out of all the gross scenes in this movie,
I know,
that's the one
that's just a guy eating.
But it's literally him, just the way he's like, oh, it's just so gross the way they do it, man. The way they shoot it, him sucking down the shrimp and the licking his, it's just too much, man. That's the one that got me in the theater. I was watching, I was just like, no, stop eating the shrimp. Stop eating the shrimp, man. I don't know what this sauce is, but stop. Just put it down.
They did their job. They disgusted you.
It is that. So yeah, as I said, not what's scary to what is scary to some is not scary to others. But if you are freaked out by body horror, if you're freaked out by gore and really, really gruesome effects, this is like, am I wrong in think like on a different level? This is like Terrifier level gore in this movie. Like it is fucked up.
It's like going to a Gwar concert, designed by Damien Leone. Like it's over the top, weird, gory, gorgasmic type stuff. It's very weird and strange, but there's so much humor in it, and there's so much like commentary in it that you're not feeling it like a horror movie. You're just going like, that's really disgusting. That's that just really grosses me out. And this movie does that very well.
I think that kind of speaks to the genius of this movie because ultimately this is more of a this is a real it's a satirical drama.
Oh yeah,
there's lots of satire in this movie, but injecting the body horror is what makes it a horror movie. So it's really interesting because again, this movie has a real message. It's important to take that message and learn from that message, and hopefully, for the love of God, learn from that message. But also, you inject a whole lot of body horror, so it's like taking a real serious story, kind of having some fun with it and having some satire with it, and also, again, exaggerating things, but then you inject a whole lot of nasty, gruesome body horror. It's a really interesting film because I can't really compare it to something else. And I think, to me, that is the mark of a truly original film because while I did, visually, I compared it a little bit to Requiem for a Dream just because some of the sequences are, visually striking, and you said, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. the story, the combination of genres, the story of the satire mixed with the horror, mixed with the drama, mixed with the acting. I can't really think of another movie like this. And Patrick, let's be honest, in our day and age, sometimes it feels like it's all been done. We just reviewed last week a movie that came out in 2022, and within a year and a half, they're releasing a fucking remake for Speak No Evil. Ideas are not hard. Original ideas are seemingly kind of hard to come by. This is a totally original movie, and I can't think of anything quite like it.
I would strongly encourage people to check out The Substance because it is unique. I think that was the big thing. My big takeaway, I think the one thing I posted on Twitter is I think it's all about big swings. Now, especially this year. We have hundreds of horror movies coming out this year. If you don't take a big swing, good luck. Good luck standing out to me because there's too much horror out there. And for you to say you can't pin the type of movie that this is, that's a huge endorsement. It's a ringing endorsement to say you can't quite see this anywhere else. I can't point to another movie and go, oh, it's a lot like that. It's not. It's very unique in all its own, and that's something that I think people must see. This is, to me, a must-see movie.
Absolutely. There's a reason why we reviewed it, because this is one of those movies that's going to get a lot of buzz. It already won an award at Cannes, and there's a good chance it's going to get nominated for some Oscars when that actually comes around next year, and rightfully so, by the way. That is our episode for this week, Patrick. Of course, we're going to be back next week. We are really close to getting into October, where it's just going to be full-on madness on this podcast. We got a ton of big movies coming out. Of course, I think the two biggest in October are going to be Smile 2, and of course, I mentioned earlier, Terrifier 3 comes out October 11th. So we got a lot of big plans coming up for the month of Halloween, the month of horror, our biggest month here on Rewind of the Living Dead. So stay tuned for that. As always, want to say a big thank you to everyone that tunes in each and every week in the show. If you want to check us out on all your favorite podcast platforms, we are everywhere. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Podcasts, everywhere you can go. And, of course, over on our YouTube channel, just search Rewind of the Living Dead. Even if you don't watch us on YouTube, please like and subscribe us over there. It does mean a lot for us over there as we try to build our subscriber base over on YouTube. So check us out over there and at least subscribe. Again, even if you never listen to us on YouTube, please do that for us. You can also reach out to us and send us questions, comments, movies you'd like us to review, your thoughts on The Substance. I always like hearing from our fans what they think of the movies. We hear a lot in comments on Instagram, but I'd like to hear from people, more personal. So please send us messages. Please send us things on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead, or you can send us an email at rotlivingdead@gmail.com. And you can also find us on our own personal social media channels. I am at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
And a big thank you, as always, for everyone that tunes into the show. We'll be back next week with another edition of Rewind of the Living Dead. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you then.
Peace.